Hey there. I want to take a second and kind of talk with you about one of my favorite plants. So, this is a peperomia, and so is this. Now, peperomias are cool because with just one leaf, you can start a whole new plant. Now, when I got this is a Hope Peperomia. I got it from a lady that I think she's in California, but when I got it, all I got was 4 leaves. And this is pretty common for some people to trade and gift people, is they give a small amount of a leaf or something like that in order to help the other person get started. And the Hope Peperomia is not something that can't be found. It's just really rare to find it in any of the stores in your local areas. So sometimes you'll find it. If you do, it's usually in a basket or something like that, or in a hanging basket rather. And these are great for that kind of overgrown, falling down, cascading look. But these guys have a very thick leaf on them, and they can be a little tricky to repot and to get growing well. So I wanted to show you how I'm going to do that with these. So in the process of all of this, I also want to show you how this one propagates. Again, I was talking about how they do from one leaf. So this guy was started from one leaf that was actually about that big. If you see that, just that big. And people, kind of think, oh, I can't do that. That's so difficult. Well, let me show you. Look, all I did was take off a few leaves that I was pruning. They had damage on them, or they were rough looking. And again, not all of them are going to start. So what I did was I just kind of put them in dirt. And in this case, what I did was I watered the dirt to where it was right at that nice level of moist, but not wet. Then I put a Ziploc bag over the entire thing. Nice and clear, not the colored kind. Nice and clear bag, and left it alone. Just set it somewhere where it can get good sun. But if I watered in that area, didn't put any extra water in, it didn't fill up. And as you can see, I've got little bitty baby plants starting all over the place. Now, with these guys, I often wait way longer than other plants in order to make sure that these guys have a good root system. They're so tenacious, and they're growing from leaves and stems and things that they'll start growing before they really have an adequate kind of root system. So I let them get probably, I'd say, twice the size of this little grouping right here. So you can see right now it's got like, I don't know, 2 or 3 leaves on it. I'll probably wait till it's like 5 or 6. Usually by then, even if it doesn't quite have a fully good developed root system, it will have enough energy and enough tenacity at that point to go ahead and start going without really needing too much extra help. So that being said, I want to go back to the Hope Peperomia. So again, both of them are in the same family. They're both peperomias. It's just that, and both of them are hard to come by. This one is what you would call a chameleon, or pink lady, excuse me. Pink princess is a different thing, and pink panther is a different thing too. I got those, both of them. They're very cool plants in and of themselves. So if you take a look, you can kind of see that variegation that's growing right there. If you put them in a little bit more light than what this guy's getting, you're going to see more pinks and more variegation. Again, it's often called a chameleon because you see how, like, right here, it's kind of got that reddish, darker tone in there. Because you can see that sometimes they'll be just solid green. Let me see if I can find a solid green leaf. Like there, right there. That looks almost like a frost peperomia, but obviously it's attached to variegation, so it's not that. So the Hope Peperomia, I know I've talked about it in the past with people and also on other videos where I don't necessarily like using scissors, but peperomias are really tough. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I've got a large section that should have started to root, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the areas that have finally grown out, and I'm going to replant those to give me some more cuttings. So I've got another little tray here, and this one doesn't need a bag. So like, whereas the other one is much more flimsy, these leaves are like, they're almost like a dime or nickel thickness. So when you have plants that have a very thick plant body and they're tenacious, where they can kind of regrow themselves from a small piece, if they're thick like that, they've got more energy stored up, so they can obviously take a little bit more abuse than some of the others. And also because I don't want them to have the potential to rot, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have some soil that's wet, but not so wet. And again, scissors are good, especially on something like this. The stalk, the centerpiece, the stem is not so thick and woody that scissors are going to give that kind of crushing damage. They're soft enough to where scissors will push everything out the way and do the job that they need to do. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and cut a small piece. Now you want to cut in between sections just like you do with other plants for nodes. So on this, you'll see we have, if I can give you the right section, if you can see right in between these set of leaves, there's that stalk right there. And that's exactly what we're going to cut. We're going to cut right in the middle of that. So now, this is about what I started with in here. And what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to lay it right on the dirt over here, and we'll come back to that in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and prune real quick and get all of those prunes ready to repot. Now, only if they're long enough without a root system am I not going to worry about that. So let's see what we got. This guy's pretty long, and I can't tell what kind of root system he's got going on. So what we might do is, since he's not as big in the lower end, is we'll probably plant him in and of a pot by himself. And what I'll do is I'll wrap it around and I'll show you how to do that. But the other pieces, the other sections, I'm hoping that they're rooted enough to where I can actually make the cuttings and put them in their own container. That way they have a chance to grow out and stem out on their own. That way you get a more bang for your buck, if you were. All right, awesome. So check this out. We've got a big section of dirt in between each one of these little leaf sections or nodes. So that means that we should be able to cut it without really damaging it, and it should have a very good chance to prop all on its own. So let's prop those guys. I'm just gonna, again, cut right in between, dead center, and there we go. We've got a 3-leaf little cutting from the stem, and if we put this guy into a pot by himself, what we're gonna see is we're gonna see branching, or it's gonna shoot out another branch. Once it starts shooting out more branches, hopefully it'll start rooting down and spreading out. And again, because they're a little harder to come by, people sometimes are more willing to take a small piece to start it because you just can't find them. All right, this one is a perfect example of one that shouldn't be cut up, okay? It's already throwing off a nice little branch. This end is already trying to root itself right there. So this one will go into a thing all by itself, just like it is, won't cut it up, because this has got a really good start. And then as we look here, this guy's got nothing really going on. So he's just been sitting there, not doing anything. We're gonna put him off to the side. Now for this long guy that we talked about earlier. This guy's probably gonna go into a container all by his lonesome. And we're gonna twist him and turn him around. So he's got a good root ball there, that's good. And then a secondary one back here. So when I pot him, we're gonna just wrap him around the pot. And then hopefully that's gonna promote him to grow out and start throwing off more runners. So now that I've got some dirt in my pot, I'm gonna show you what I mean by wrapping him around. So what I wanna do is I wanna set this guy in and kind of tuck him in a little bit. Just kind of setting the soil down a little. And it's a little lower than I usually would go in the pot, but now we're gonna wrap. So now we wanna try to make sure that the leaves stay up, at least as much as possible. This little twisted leaf down here, he's probably gonna be sacrificed to the dirt. But usually that's not a terrible end for them. So now I'm gonna take some loose dirt and kind of gonna pack them down. Don't worry if you cover up a leaf too much, because the plant itself will probably try to reach through the dirt and pull that leaf up in and of itself, just to kind of, because in nature, especially when they run along the floor or the ground or whatever, they want to stretch towards the light, and we want to use that to our advantage a little bit. But we want the stalk covered good so that it continues to throw off new roots and things. So it looks a little unruly, and probably once we start watering it, it'll probably sink in, and I'll probably have to come back with a little bit more dirt to kind of put on top. But that is a wonderful start to having a plant that you could give to somebody, sell to somebody. Goodness knows, I wish that I had gotten mine with some stem on there, because it would have made things so much quicker and so much easier to to get started. So these little guys, this is the one I told you was going to be a really good start. Mosquitoes. Anyway, this one's the one that was going to be a really good start because it's already pushed up. We've got a nice root system and 2 little spots here going on it. So what I'm going to do for this guy is, rather than putting dirt around it, I'm going to open up the dirt and set it right into the dirt. Then what I want to do is pack it back around the area and make sure that it's nice and tight in there to kind of prevent some movement. Once I have it where it's kind of stable, then I can add some more dirt around it to kind of promote the growth in the areas that I want. By not overdoing it, I'm going to allow this guy to still make as much energy as possible from these leaves. And I'm just using the scissors to help me kick some dirt, or kick the leaf up to kick some dirt under, kind of propping it up the way I want to. And you can do that and get the growth the way you want it to. And sometimes you'll see like a piece of bark in your dirt. You can use that to help cap down and press down without pressing on the plant too hard. So then you would pack that piece in to hold it down, and that little piece of bark is going to help you in the long run. So it looks a little awkward right now, and probably on a piece like this, even though it's a really great starter piece, probably what's going to happen is it's going to start throwing off branches in this direction and that direction. And in order to help kind of get it to bush out, once I've gotten a longer stem out on it, I'll clip it back so that it starts to push more branches out. And that way you'll get a much more bushy item. Now, that being said, a lot of people may not want that. They may want it in a hanging basket. They may want it to cascade over. And in which case, that would be fine because this guy's going to do that anyway. He's going to kind of grow out and cascade down. So this is just a starter point to kind of give somebody the options that they want. When you go looking for a plant, you're going to want it to make sure that it follows what you want for it. If you just want the plant to be like a species only in that only pot, and you just want it to grow out bushy and really good in and of itself, then you can do that just by training it. Now, as for these little 3 ones, these are great starting cuttings. So I would put this in there, and if I was selling it, I would put this as a fully rooted cutting, because it is fully rooted. It's got all of this dirt that's being held together by its roots. And the best way to take care of these guys and tuck them in is just to make a small depression about the size of the dirt that's already there and press them in. Go ahead and kind of pack it in just like you would normal roots. If you need to go under the leaves and press down in order, you're going to see you got some stem stuff going on there. And just like before, if you find a nice little piece of bark or something, that's great to kind of set over top of the stem in order to kind of help it down without really pressing it down. And then you can put in some fill dirt behind that to kind of cover over the stem, just to make it look a little bit more presentable. And again, once you start rinsing and, not rinsing, but watering, you're gonna see that some of this is gonna kind of fade into the background a little bit. But you still wanna make sure that the leaves are there and as much of the stalk is covered as possible, because that in and of itself, just having the stalk covered, forces it to kind of go, ooh, here's my growth point, let me push out. And that's really good. So it's very basic, but this would be your rooted cutting. All right, now this guy is already kind of standing up on his own, and this gives me an opportunity to show you another way to kind of start your guy going. Now, if you look, I see I dug a little hole there, and I'm not gonna press too hard. I just wanna see how he's gonna sit in there, and then I'm gonna tuck him in. So this one's gonna actually be treated more like you would regular cutting now, and just give him a nice tuck. Now, all of these bigger leaves are kind of curled in, and I don't want to cover them over to the point where they're covered, because they're so thick. If they start to rot, that might actually send the rot into the rest of the plant, and I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to just try to push these leaves out while tucking in the main stem, and hopefully I won't break any of them. And again, look, I found a nice piece of bark or wood, and I'm going to use that to help me keep it in, but also prop the leaf up. So it's tucked and covered. Now, if you look real closely right in here, you can see that root is kind of exposed. And again, I want to cover it so it can start growing and doing its own thing, and I don't want it to dry out because that might be an infection point or a place for some bad stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of dirt and kind of prop it right up against it, cover it over. So it's nice and covered, and it's probably going to eventually, as I water it, be exposed. But I'd rather a slow exposure than a quick exposure, because the slow exposure, it has a chance to adapt. Life is adapting, and we all do better with small changes than drastic ones. It's already drastic enough that it's been cut and moved and kicked around. All right, so here's what we got from all of that. We ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that was 11 little cuttings. Now, probably won't count this one because he's just by himself, and I will wait until, you know, he's got some more growth on him before I even think about giving him or selling him to somebody. But that's because I want to be ethical about things. Some people are not so ethical. I'll make another video on that one. But I also have these 3 guys here. These guys are in good position to go ahead and start rooting. Now, what I can do is put some dirt around the edges of them, kind of giving them more cover along the stems. But I'm going to wait a day because these guys hold so much water. I'm not going to pile it on there because I especially want the ends of these guys, since they have no roots, to callus over. The reason I want to do that is because the callusing over of that area will promote the growth of roots. So don't freak out about that kind of thing, and don't worry about it when you have ones that already have roots, because the plant itself is not relying on previously drawn areas to draw in water. So hopefully the callus part will happen all on its own, and you won't have to necessarily worry too much about it. So that being said, these are going to make great cuttings, and if you have anything that you have a question about, keep looking at my videos. Hopefully I'll eventually get through all of the stuff that I have to show you how to propagate, take care of, maintain. And one last thing for peperomias I will tell you is almost every peperomia I've ever come into contact with really enjoys being fully wet, like once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. So in the process of having them, I would suggest taking yourself a big bucket, a big bowl, a big whatever, sticking the whole thing in the water and allowing it to fully soak up the water, and then ignore it for a week or 2. Now, some of them, like these guys, can go even longer because they hold so much water in their leaves. And then going back to this guy, the leaves are very narrow, very thin. They're almost paper thin. This guy will look like he is overwatered and wet when he really needs water. He'll droop and hang over and feel even more flimsy. But as soon as you water it thoroughly, he'll bounce right back, pop right back up. But that's stressful on him. So keep in mind, if the soil is dry, give them a nice thorough soak, and then take them out. They'll do a whole lot better that way. I love these little guys. All the peperomias are so much fun. All right, see you guys next time.